Dear all, hello, 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 welcome. If you could slowly sit down, please, so that we could start in time, that would be amazing. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. If everyone could please take a seat so that we can start on time, that would be fantastic. Also people on the left side of the room, thank you very much.
Hello everyone. So it's really, really nice to have you all here at MAXXI. And it's a great, great pleasure for us to host this other event. We're really all thrilled and happy coming from the great event that was organized at the auditorium just now. And I have the pleasure to welcome you to the MAXXI Museum, to the National Museum for Contemporary Art. But this is not just a formal welcome that I want to give you. I would really want to share with you a very short 1.5-minute video that will expose and present to you one of the projects we are dealing with and dwelling with, which is really the idea of putting into action the vision of the European Bauhaus. Madame Ursula von der Leyen was with us some days ago. We call this project Greater MAXXI, and I have to be very thankful to Minister Giovannini because he's supporting this project. And in fact, we just announced 2 days ago the winner of the architects, winner of the project. And Greater MAXXI is about expanding a museum to a research institution on sustainability. We want architects, artists, engineers to work together and to create projects for regenerating cities. We discuss within the European Bauhaus project how important the construction industry is. You know that 40% of total CO2 emission comes from the construction and the building environment, so we really feel that we have an important role as the National Museum and National Research Center for Architecture. And there will be a surprise today, but I will not be the one to tell you the surprise. I will leave Minister Giovannini do that later on, just to tell you how connected we are with the commemoration of Aurelio Peccei. And if I can just put there a very short personal note, I was and I am an environmentalist since many, many years. I grew up on the Club of Rome books. I'm an economist by training, so I'm not perfect at all, because economists really need to reshape their idea. I talked briefly just 2 hours ago with my other hat on. I see here many of the activists of a new financial sector putting impact investment at the core. I will not, go on over this, but let me just tell you that you are here. You are in the National Museum for Contemporary Art, which is not just a museum, it's a laboratory for future. It's a laboratory for prototyping new worlds. Artists are very often, I just said that some hours ago, but they're very often future tellers, and we want to put into action one of the paradigms of the European world we want to build with the green and energy transition, with the new with the next generation, with the Bauhaus, and with the social just transition. So please share with me this very short movie, and then I'll just say 2 words. Thank you. Just another few words. First of all, I really want to acknowledge Sandrine Dixson-Decle, because her leadership today was so clear, such a powerful lady. Really, Sandrine, I want to thank you for all what you're doing. Please. You. And I also want to welcome and thank him for being with us, Mayor of Rome, Roberto Gualtieri. This is a great project for our city. And let me put it this way: we want at MAXXI, we wish to be the change we want to see in the world. We've been doing a lot of theory, and we really want to create an institution that, as, again, let me quote her, Ursula von der Leyen said some days ago here, wants to be a pivotal place for sustainable change, social change, artistic vision, and beauty. This is the Bauhaus idea, and we want to embody it in Rome. Let me just tell you that this is a project that won the international competition. We had an international competition in 3 months. It was an anonymous competition. We wanted young professionals to share ideas with us. 103 projects were presented, and this is the group that won, and we realized that it was them when we opened the envelopes. It's an international group. It's called LAN, and I want to say that the green part of this project has 2 parts. One is the Research Center for Art, Architecture, and Artificial Intelligence to be at the service of regeneration projects in Rome and all over Italy and Europe. Our commitment is to be one of the key places in Europe where we think and we practice regeneration, urban regeneration. And the other part of the project is this huge green corridor. We want to have urban gardens, we want to have artists and landscape architects working with us, which will sort of, hopefully, bring a lot of plants and trees amongst Zaha Hadid's cement, which is too much. I mean, she was a genius, she is a genius, she was a genius, but we need to bring a lot of plants in, in the surroundings. So the green corridor will be part of the surprise. You will know in a few moments, and I'll leave the surprise for you. Thank you very much.
For those of you who were here this afternoon, I apologize for coming back up and boring you with more words. Hopefully I can add to the incredible vibrance of the summit that we were at this afternoon. We're all here to celebrate the life and the vision of Aurelio Peccei. Aurelio Peccei, for me and for many of us who are members of the Club of Rome, symbolized what it is to be a Renaissance person. I won't say Renaissance man. The fact that actually we can understand the importance, and that is why we're here at the MAXXI, of culture, think of Leonardo da Vinci, of faith, think of the Vatican and spirituality and values, of business leadership, think of Andrea Illy. Where are you, Andrea? And so many others, including Aurelio himself, who was a businessman. The fact that, and this is what we tried to speak about today, we all embody, many of us, all of these different facets of ourselves. That we are not just Cartesian or linear in our thinking, that we actually realize that we are better because of these different elements of ourselves. It makes us human. And thank you for bringing a child to remind us that actually that is what makes us human. Aurelio started the Club of Rome in Rome, but brought so many different visionaries with him. There was only one flaw in that vision, and I'm going to have to be honest about that, which was that actually there were very few women in the beginning. And the lead author of The Limits to Growth, and that is what we're celebrating today, the 50th anniversary of The Limits to Growth, was actually a woman. It was Donella Meadows. And I would like to applaud Donella because she is what made the Club of Rome, even though she was never admitted as a member of the club. And that is the only failing of the club, but it represented those days as well. And I think we all need to forgive and to move on. And as the first co-president of the Club of Rome, who is a female, alongside my co-president, Mampela Ramfele, we know that it's so important to forgive and to move on. And that's what we're here to do. First, to celebrate the brilliance of a Renaissance man who did have the vision that actually we do have a human predicament. It is us. We are the human predicament. And let me just read you a quote, and then I will pass over to the mayor and to those who actually knew Aurelio even better than myself to reflect on his incredible life. The common enemy of humanity is man, and in some cases women, by the way, because women who forget that they're women are just as bad as men. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill, and clearly we're all living that now. But the real enemy then is humanity itself, because those are symptoms of the way in which we live, and I'm adding and extrapolating, within an extractive society and way beyond the finite planetary boundaries. This man, who was a businessman, but a visionary, set up the Club of Rome and then commissioned the incredible seminal report, The Limits to Growth. The Limits to Growth, which was a report that actually crunched out a series of different scenarios, mostly calculated by some very young researchers, scientists like Donella, who felt that it was important to understand system dynamic modeling. These huge computers, massive, that took rooms actually, are what already predicted where we would be today. So when people say to me, and by the way, I grew up in Silicon Valley, technology will do the trick. And I actually see that the IT revolution has done very little to make people's lives and livelihoods, in particular inequality, go away, or poverty go away, especially those of you who have been in San Francisco recently and know that actually the inequality only continues to grow. So we have the vision of an incredible man, Aurelio Peccei. We have this incredible report. And now what we need to do, and that is what today is about, is not only to celebrate that vision, but to reflect on what it means in our lives. As Carlos, my lovely vice president, always says, let's not forget the blind spots. And let's remember, as we do go through these reflections and commemorate this incredible man, that it is those blind spots that have truly made us not evolve and not truly be reborn in order to give honor to what a real Renaissance is all about. And that is why we are here, and that is why we are here to commemorate and to remember, but that is also why we now have to embody that as we stand on the shoulders of giants to make sure that we continue to be giant and to reborn in order to truly show what Renaissance means. Thank you. Now, I've been told that these lovely gentlemen don't necessarily want to come up to the podium, so I'm going to leave it up to you. But what I would like to do is have a few opening testimonials, first of all, as we are here in Rome, from the mayor, and thank you for giving us your time and your support. And then to move to Lorenzo, Fioramonti, I always do this, Lorenzo, I'm so sorry. Fioramonti, was that okay? Who not only was former Minister of Education, has been intimately involved in looking deeply at the needs of the well-being economy and how we actually put forward the well-being economy as a model for governments across the globe. And then we will have a bit of a film about Aurelio's life and also some quick impulses coming from Riccardo Peccei, who is the son of Aurelio, and also from Diva Tomai, who is running now the Aurelio Peccei Foundation. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. It's such a great pleasure for me to be here today in this wonderful place that is MAXXI, also that's going to become even more beautiful and sustainable. This great project of the new great MAXXI that Giovanna just presented, also with the winners of the great architecture design, and it's an honor to be here to pay tribute to an extraordinary figure as Aurelio Peccei. That's someone that really has been able to develop a way of thinking that was groundbreaking for the time, and really paved the way for a different way to look at development, economics, environment, and the way in which the mankind has to relate with the environment. And that's not, now that this is common sense, let's say, is probably is difficult to understand how this was revolutionary at the time. The philosopher Hegel says Minerva howls, flies at dusk. That meaning that is normally the theoretical knowledge of what's going on normally arrives later and never during the time. Why? Because normally one tends to project the present to the future, looking at the future with the eyes of the present, which is exactly the concept of linear growth. You don't think that, you think that things won't change too much. And that's also in the COVID was difficult not to think, we were naturally thinking linear, while actually the pandemic was moving exponentially. And so the greatness of the limits to growth and what Aurelio and the thinker did was actually to consider that no, the future is not going to be a linear continuation of the present, but this is something qualitative that is changing. And I'm not a statistician as Enrico is, but that was a statistical concept that developed to a way of thinking far beyond numbers and enter into the quality of development. So it was a sense of correct way of thinking quantities that became quality way to look for from a different perspective to our life, to development, to beyond GDP, to what is the relationship between rate of growth, rate of use of resources, that was not a constant rate of use, but a rate of growth, that meaning that mankind would have soon face a significant limit exactly to growth and to development. And now that we are aware of this, we really have to pay tribute to how the clever Rome and Aurelio and the thinker would develop the famous publication, were able to open a new era of reflection, but also policy making. And it's true that since then, we, I mean, as a policy maker, have been too slow to adapt our policy making to that's 50 years ago very clear projection on what the model of development would have lead to. Now we know far better what it means in terms of climate change, in terms of degrees in rate of increase, in terms of how much we have to cut greenhouse emissions in order to reach neutrality by 2050, which means cutting by 2030, which means limiting the temperature increase by, etc., etc. We now know far more in detail, but still we know that we need to do significant policy changes in order to meet those targets, which are essential to save mankind, not only the planet, or even I would say more the mankind than the planet. The planet may adapt itself. The problem is our capacity to survive in the planet. And so now that we are really, and we see also in difficult votes in the European Parliament, debate, you know, we are really close to the awareness that we need to do something more, even that we had agreed a few years ago, and we had to give a strong impulse in investment in change of our development model, which would have enormous consequences if we need to shift to electric transportation, eliminating internal combustion engines by 2035. That's huge, but we have to do that. If we need, we as a city of Rome has been selected, we are very proud of that as one of the 100 cities that have to reach carbon neutrality before Europe, and so to pave the way by 2030 to the neutrality by 2050. That means huge policy changes. So we have to be, we cannot just honor Aurelio Peccei and the report on limit to growth, but we have to show with action that we have understood that lesson, and we are able to make policy choices which are consistent with the limits to growth. Now we know even more better than 50 years ago which they are actually. We are trying to do that, and Europe is trying to do that with also important policy decision, controversies, but I hope that now also the difficulties that we saw some days ago will be overcome, and Italy and the cities have to do their part. So what we are trying is to review all the area of our policy action as an administration to put at the center the social and environmental sustainability concept, which means do not only some marginal changes, but to try to profoundly change the way in which a city is conceived and works. We are working on the concept of 15-minute cities, which means cities where you overcome the differences of areas where you live, where you work, where you buy, where you enjoy art, and we try to have a more, let's say, diffuse concept of city, which is essential also for let's say, for emissions, but not only for that, for the quality of life, because one crucial point that I know that the Club of Rome is very strong on that, is that you cannot have environmental sustainability without social sustainability. The two things are, the two sides of the coin, are strongly interconnected, because it's not just some cut that you have to do here and there, is a different pattern, it's a different model of development. And so, and that's why the way, if a city wants to become sustainable, it cannot only put some limit here and there, it has to be reshaped in a way in which it works, putting together technology, inclusion, and circularity and sustainability. We are trying to do that with a lot of projects. We have created a climate unit which would have to coordinate all the different policy areas with the angle of climate neutrality. We will try to build up energy communities to do all the infrastructure and transport investment that, thanks to Enrico, Giovannini, and the government, that we have the resources now to try to do. We are trying to develop on the waste management fully the concept of circularity and use the best available technology to reduce, recycle, and recover what waste is. We are trying, let's say, to build urban forestation as a widespread concept of adaptation and mitigation to climate change. So we are aware that we have a very ambitious goal, and that's a point which brings me to the importance of commemorating, pay tribute to Aurelio Peccei, and supporting the work of the Club of Rome. We will never, as a government action, achieve our goals if the concept of a social environmental sustainability does not become a common goal toward which civil society, intellectual organization, enterprises, finance, all together converge. So it's a great deal, it's a green deal that you have to strike, not only at European level and national level, but at city level. And that's why the activity of those who put this concept at the center of our public discourse are essential, because can never be only a top-down achievement, but it has to be a top-down and bottom-up endeavor. So really, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to pay tribute to Aurelio Peccei. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a conversation with the Club of Rome, which really is a fundamental body that we would like to support in this effort. And thank you, of course, to Giovanna to host us in this great MAXXI. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to bridge the gap between the beautiful scenario that you've just shown us around the role of the city and how the city can truly become sustainable, and these green corridors, because I think more and more of us are also talking about how we can join up, not only bring green corridors through a museum, but also how do we create green corridors between cities and also rural areas. And how do we, in particular, look at the social and the environmental together? And that is a perfect entry point to Lorenzo, because if you look at the well-being economy, that's exactly what we talk about. Lorenzo.
Thank you, Sandrine, and good evening, everyone. As a young student of economic history, I came across Aurelio Peccei's work and the Limits to Growth report when I was in my early freshman years. And, well, let's face it, Aurelio Peccei died in 1984. By then I was 7, so I didn't know, I've never met him personally. But the contribution that he made to the understanding of economic complexity was unparalleled. And I couldn't believe that that was an Italian, that I'd never come across, a name that never surfaced in any debate, not at university, not at school, ever, that very few people around me knew. And that's how I discovered that this great Italian in the 1960s started wondering, what is the role of a businessman? What are the responsibilities of industrialists? And how can they not just only make profit, but make profit that actually improves the quality of life of people and makes the world a better place? I think, you know, the Limits to Growth report has been a milestone in our understanding of environmental complexity, of our interaction as humans with the rest of nature. But it's also been an incredible advancement in science. Not everyone knows this, but that was the first time that computation technology was used to analyze systems and complex natural and human processes. They put together the team led by Enel and Dennis Meadows at the MIT with those computers that Sandrine was referring to, those big computers that had to crunch a lot of data. It was the first time that systems thinking met technology and science to do something which would be relevant to the world. This is something that as a Minister of Education, University and Research, I really emphasize, the fact that science has to be relevant. That science, when it works across disciplines, when it uses the best technology that we have at our disposal, can make a huge difference, can be a driving force for improvement. And again, behind that idea, there was a man from the 1960s, 1970s that had come from a sector you wouldn't expect, right? I mean, Aurelio Peccei had been with Olivetti, had been with Fiat, had experiences in conventional industrial sectors and realized back then that there was something fundamentally wrong. I mean, imagine questioning the concept of growth in the 1970s. Doing that even today is often considered anathema, is often considered a reason to be ridiculed in public. Imagine doing that when the same consciousness we have today wasn't as widespread. The other thing that I think stayed with me and stuck with me for so long was the fact that, again, some of the brilliance of that work was massively attacked across decades. We're now here celebrating that report, remembering how much they anticipated of what is happening around the world. But at that time, those people were ridiculed in public. Those people were attacked by the media, by their counterparts, by the way, by conventional economists who didn't like that. I mean, the Club of Rome was renamed the Club of Doom, among other things. And they even accused of being the masterminds of a global conspiracy to try and curtail economic progress around the world. And yet people like Aurelio, like Donella Meadows, and so on and so forth, endured that attack, endured those times, which I've been in politics for a couple of years now. I can tell you, it's quite hard to go through those personal attacks. I can only imagine how hard it must have been back then when the whole world was looking at them and accusing them of being against progress and against the future. So what stayed with me of that experience is probably the importance of focusing on the short term, that at some point people will recognize the fact that you were right. People will recognize the fact that what you said, what you did, was an example of what everyone should try and achieve, and not be afraid of being criticized, not being afraid of being different. You know, the mainstream can be very stifling often. And I think this experience, what Aurelio Peccei and his team did, has endured the test of time and has shown that even in Rome, the city where the club originally originated as an idea, and I mean, it'd be great to have the Club of Rome eventually come back to Rome and be here and impact the public discourse in this country that at times is really backward, is really stuck. It seems to be stuck in a different era. And this brings me to my conclusion, what Sandrine said about the idea of well-being. I think what Aurelio Peccei and his team did back in the 1970s was try to wake up the world to the reality of environmental destruction and what that would mean for everyone's life. I think if he were here today, he wouldn't focus too much on the negative part. He would focus on the positive one. He would try and argue that we stand a great chance to build a better world, that actually the fight against climate change shouldn't be about climate change, but should be about improving well-being. It should be about making our lives more fulfilling. It should be about building a better society. I remember this beautiful cartoon a few years ago that I saw on an Australian newspaper, that there was this guy standing in front of a COP, let's say COP 100, one of these UN conferences, and the guy stood up and said, "Oh, come on, what if this whole climate change story is just a scam and we end up building a better world for nothing?" Right? So, I mean, that is the point. The fight against climate change is intrinsically a fight for progress. It's a fight for a better life. And I think Aurelio Peccei and his work, and we have done that with a book that is going to be launched at the end of the year by the Club of Rome, we would focus today not only on what the problems are, but what the solutions are, how to do that, and how to put well-being rather than growth at the center of our development model, which I firmly believe is the only functioning and very positive way forward for all societies around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you so much for your challenge. And by the way, we are still going to have celebratory drinks, huh? So we just wanted to bring forward the life of this incredible man so that people really understood how much he's marked people's lives, and also the beauty of what he said. And what you just said, Lorenzo, reminded me so much of how little is known of also that period, because Aurelio influenced and talked to some unbelievable people, including, we know, the Kennedys. And I just want to speak to you a little bit about Bobby Kennedy's speech at the University of Kansas when he actually launched his campaign for what we had hoped would be a new president. And everyone knows what history brought us, unfortunately. But I'm not going to read the entire speech, but in essence what it says is GDP measures everything except that which is worthwhile. 1968, 2 years after I was born. There were people actively talking about limits to growth. There were people in those days actively, like Aurelio, thinking through how do we place a value on truly what matters. And yet, as you so rightly say, we let 50 years go by. So the message from this afternoon and tonight is, this is the decisive decade. We cannot let another 50 years, absolutely cannot. And as also was said by Lord Mayor, which is so true, the planet will go on without us. We are our greatest existential risk. It's not even climate change, it's us as humanity, which again, Aurelio indicated. So let me introduce Aurelio Peccei through this short film.
today, for the first time in human history, there is one mankind, not scattered civilizations in their own environments, with their own fate, but a vast mankind, humankind, which will have to decide all together where we want to go, where we may go. Sono Aurelio Peccei, sono nato nel 1908 a Torino, mi sono laureato in economia, ho cominciato a lavorare a 16 anni, quindi ho già lavorato 50 anni. Avendo raggiunto una certa età, ho preferito ritirarmi progressivamente dalle mie funzioni. Sono rimasto consulente della Fiat, ho lasciato la carica di vicepresidente della Olivetti volontariamente, sono ancora presidente dell'Italconsult, sono stato l'ideatore e uno dei fondatori del Club di Roma, a cui dedico molta della mia attività attuale.
Aurelio Peccei, 66 anni, torinese. È stato definito l'umanista con il computer, un modo come un altro per dire che alle legittime preoccupazioni del grande dirigente industriale, con l'occhio ai grafici di produzione, sa unire una non consueta attenzione per l'uomo e i suoi problemi.
C'è stata in tutte le cose del mondo, in ciascuno di noi, in me stesso, una profonda evoluzione. Gli anni 1950 o 60 sono diversi dagli anni 1970. Oggi abbiamo delle percezioni, vediamo delle cose che 15 o 20 anni fa non ci apparivano così chiare o così importanti. Il continuare sui ritmi, nelle direzioni di 15 o 20 anni fa è suicida, praticamente questo è quello che il Club di Roma dice. Dobbiamo adattarci alle nuove condizioni e anche dobbiamo modificare in quello che ci interessa più personalmente, con sacrificio, con grave sacrificio anche di alcune cose, dobbiamo modificare il nostro modo di vita individuale e sociale. Quindi un dirigente industriale come sono io deve continuare a produrre, deve produrre però in un modo diverso che per il passato, deve aiutare a avere dei traguardi economici, produttivi, industriali diversi da quelli che avevamo nel passato, deve essere uno degli elementi più sensibili e più avanzati per una rapida evoluzione della società e nella società dell'apparato produttivo.
In tutto il mondo gli uomini hanno cercato con crescente frenesia nel ventre della terra i minerali e le energie per nutrire la più fantastica esplosione industriale e demografica di tutti i tempi. Il prodotto nazionale lordo è stato il mito della nostra epoca. Più acciaio, più grano, più petrolio, più armi, più prodotti chimici, più condizionatori d'aria, più missili, più centrali elettriche, più automobili. Ogni anno la produzione aumenta, l'estrazione di materie prime si accelera sempre più, crescono i consumi e gli inquinamenti, la popolazione sale e aumentano di conseguenza le necessità di cibo e di altre materie prime. La nostra Terra, che galleggia nello spazio con il suo sottilissimo strato di biosfera, può accogliere uno sviluppo senza limiti, oppure le sue stesse dimensioni creano inevitabilmente un limite fisico allo sviluppo. E quanto siamo lontani da questo limite?
3 anni fa, un libro, pubblicato in milioni di copie in quasi tutte le lingue, aveva fatto scandalo, prefigurando una possibile crisi del modello di sviluppo tecnologico in atto nell'Occidente. Era la prima volta che una voce d'allarme si levava di fronte al mito di un progresso materiale senza limiti, proiettato in un futuro di risorse inesauribili. Le risorse della Terra sono invece esauribili, afferma il rapporto redatto dai ricercatori del Massachusetts Institute of Technology, dietro richiesta del Club di Roma. I 17 ricercatori del System Dynamics Group dedicarono il loro rapporto ad Aurelio Peccei, segretario esecutivo del club stesso e animatore della ricerca.
We have put into question some of the sacred cows of our society, the taboos of our society, and it is quite logical that we have raised hell of controversy.
But then came the energy crisis.
Well, the energy crisis showed that situations were not as good as in appearance everybody thought just a few years back.
And maybe the critics of limits to growth tuned somewhat.
Yes, I think that many people have found a new way of making fools of themselves in not recognizing that there are limits to human expansion.
Surely one of the motivations of your activities concerning the Club of Rome must be the sight of your wonderful offspring, these kids,
yes, of
and
course.
their future.
Of course. They and all their friends, all the young people of the world, not only of our countries, because I think that we have prepared for them a very ugly world. We have to do something to correct what we have done so far. But they are the living image of the young people I have always in mind when we work.
Cape Canaveral, Florida. Siamo venuti qui con un gruppo di ragazzi per sapere cosa pensa il dottor Wernher von Braun, il padre delle imprese spaziali americane, del rapporto dell'uomo con la macchina.
Dottor von Braun, la tecnologia ha fatto grandi passi avanti in questi anni, ha risolto molti problemi, ha semplificato molte operazioni prima faticose, però ne ha creati altri di tutti i generi, come quelli ecologici e quelli del rapporto tra l'uomo e la macchina. Non pensa che la tecnologia dovrebbe essere frenata un poco?
Frenare non è la risposta per risolvere il problema. Abbiamo bisogno di materie prime, di legname, oppure petrolio, case e tutto il resto, ma soprattutto lavoro per questa gente. Siamo noi che dobbiamo continuare a lavorare per creare lavoro per questa gente del futuro, sviluppando e sfruttando nuove materie prime di cui avrà bisogno questa gente. Se no, ci sarà carestia generale. Fermarsi ora è come un suicidio di massa.
Dottor Peccei, il dottor von Braun ha parlato di un eventuale arresto del progresso della tecnologia come di un suicidio di massa. Lei è d'accordo?
Io credo che il progresso tecnologico non si deve fermare e non si può fermare. Bisogna riorientarlo, dirigerlo in un altro senso. Lo sforzo che abbiamo fatto, e von Braun ce l'ha fatto anche vedere in parte, è per creare degli strumenti di distruzione, per acquistare maggior prestigio, per andare sulla Luna, non per cercare di dare educazione, miglior vitto, casa, alle centinaia di milioni di uomini che nel mondo ne sono privi. Quindi il progresso ci deve essere, ma un altro tipo di progresso, non quello che adesso va per la maggiore. Lo sforzo che fanno i paesi tecnologicamente più avanzati per il 90% è per acquisire maggior ricchezza a quelli che già l'hanno, per creare degli strumenti di distruzione, come ho detto, o per fare delle grandi imprese che sono magnifiche, bellissime e che dimostrano l'ingegnosità dell'uomo, ma che non servono per la massa dell'umanità.
My father was one of the early socialists in Italy, and he taught me two things. First, to be a man, and second, to be a free man. And out of his teachings and experiences of the sad period of fascism in Italy, I was not a fascist. I have been always a free thinker in a deeply Catholic or formalistically Catholic country. I was not an outcast, but I was not in. I was one of the people who were not in society. And out of that, probably, an outlook of life emerged. Then I was very lucky in my life. I had a very beautiful family. I had health. I had education. And I feel that I am very much indebted to society, and that my debt is long for being paid back. I have to do very many more things to be square, at least, with what I have received from my fellow countrymen, from my fellow contemporaries.
Ricordo che lei è stato partigiano, un combattente per la libertà e la democrazia. Vorrei chiederle, dottor Peccei, che significato avevano questi due valori quando lei lottava per difenderli? Che cosa significano oggi libertà e democrazia? E che nuovo significato dovrebbero acquistare questi due valori nella società futura che lei auspica?
Anzitutto io sono stato nelle file di giustizia e libertà e avevamo discusso molto fra di noi se dovesse essere libertà e giustizia oppure se dovesse essere come fu giustizia e libertà. La giustizia già allora, forse con uno certo spirito anteveggente, secondo noi aveva il primo posto. Senza giustizia non vi può essere libertà, o vi può essere libertà soltanto per taluni. La libertà non trascina con sé la giustizia. Io credo che noi dobbiamo avere il coraggio dell'utopia. Se guardiamo bene il futuro dell'uomo, dell'umanità, dei nostri figli e dei figli dei nostri figli, è un qualcosa che forgiamo noi, che immaginiamo o che involontariamente creiamo noi stessi. Il futuro, in questo senso umano, è una invenzione sociale della comunità e quindi dobbiamo avere il coraggio di vedere il futuro migliore, il migliore che si possa ottenere nelle condizioni reali dell'oggi e quelle che vi saranno domani. Quindi parlare di utopia con scherno o con scetticismo mi pare che non fa che metterci in una condizione ancora più difficile di quella in cui siamo adesso, perché dimostriamo di non avere la volontà, il coraggio, la visione di cercare qualcosa di meglio nel futuro di quanto abbiamo oggi su questa terra.
Oggi è forse l'ultima occasione che abbiamo, però se non cambiamo rotta, se continuiamo a fare quello che facciamo grosso modo adesso, tutti insieme, andiamo sicuramente verso un precipizio. Se noi continuiamo per la strada attuale non c'è nessun dubbio che andiamo verso delle crisi molto maggiori, probabilmente verso dei disastri, verso delle catastrofi. Non c'è nessun problema fondamentale dell'umanità che viene, non dico risolto, ma neanche affrontato e forse neanche compreso.
We are going to quickly go into a video of Aurelio Peccei's son, who has sent a few words. We felt it might be easier to go straight into that video before we conclude. I just want to make a few remarks about this incredible film, and if we can start the next video. First, obviously, you saw his sons all cooking at a barbecue. And meat, lots of meat. I think today, probably we would have seen a different image, hopefully. But it demonstrates again that still this incredibly thoughtful man was really a leader at that time, a time which was totally different from where we are today, and yet all of that thought leadership which resonates so much in today's society. And how is it possible that so many people did not listen? Let's maybe bring on Riccardo Peccei, who is addressing us from England, and then we will conclude and go and have a few drinks and some canapes together. Thank you.
I would like to finish with a few brief, more personal memories about my father. First and foremost is the absolute certainty that my brother Roberto, my sister Paola, and I always had as we were growing up of being loved and cherished by him and by our mother. It is difficult to think of a greater gift that parents can bestow on their children, and for that I am forever grateful to them. Beyond that, however, are the wonderful memories of 3 generations of the family coming together in the summer house my parents built in Punta Ala in Tuscany. Of my father sitting at the head of the table with my mother on his right, all of us having dinner together as a family. This periodic coming together of the whole family was, I know, one of the greatest joys of both my parents. And memories of my father and I playing long games of chess on the beach in Punta Ala, and of going to play golf with him and my mother very early in the morning, so as not to get in the way of more serious golfers, with me serving as their caddy. Although we were all the poor players, the competition between my parents to see who was the least worst player was really quite keen. My mother usually won, with many short little shots that didn't go very far, but at least she stayed on the fairway. My father instead was much more ambitious. He would hit the ball as hard as he could, but unfortunately it seldom went straight. So I usually ended up spending quite a lot of time in the Tuscan woods in our little golfing escapades. And further, the memory of my father sitting out in the sun on the terrace in the house in Rome, working on the manuscript of his first book, The Chasm Ahead, and of him sitting exactly in the same spot 12 years later, putting the finishing touches to what was to be his last book, 100 Pages for the Future. And finally, the last hug on the doorstep on the house in Rome in the early new year of 1984, not knowing that it was to be the last goodbye. But my father lives on, in the memory of those who loved him and who knew him, as well as through his work and his ideas, through the lives and the work of all the people that he has influenced and inspired. All those, after all, to whom he dedicated the human quality all those many years ago. In his own words, to my children, to their children, to all the young, for them to understand that they have to be better than us. Thank you.
Can I please ask Diva Tomei and also Gianfranco to please come up as well, both of you. Yes, Gianfranco, please. Gianfranco Bologna and Diva, both who are representing the Aurelio Peccei Foundation. Gianfranco didn't want to speak. He wanted Diva to speak. But I just want to point out that Gianfranco has been steadfast in ensuring that Aurelio Peccei's vision and life is commemorated in Italy. And I think it's important that you be here while Diva speaks.
Thank you, Sandrine. So good afternoon, everyone, and really benvenuti to this beautiful venture that is welcoming us here today to celebrate the great accomplishments of Aurelio Peccei. My name is Diva Tomei, and I am really incredibly honored to be here today as president of the Aurelio Peccei Foundation. I promise I'll be brief and leave some space maybe to Gianfranco later. So a couple of words about Aurelio Peccei. I think I would describe him as a true pioneer of the 20th, but also the 21st century. It's really not that common that you get to be recognized as a pioneer across 2 centuries, but I think that the fact that we can, in this case, really speaks to the level of outstanding work, of thought leadership that he did when he was alive, and the impact that his work has had and still has and will inevitably continue to have on the debate about the future of humanity on this planet. When Aurelio Peccei and the Club of Rome commissioned the limits to growth to a group of MIT researchers, I think they set out to find out what the future would look like if we kept exploiting the planet's resources at the pace that we were, and if we kept growing on all levels, economic, demographic, at the pace that we were. And the results were put in a report that was published in 1972. And this was truly one of the first global warnings for humanity. Based on a scenario analysis, this report predicted 12 different possible futures from 1972 to 2100. And the main scientific conclusion of the report was that at the pace of growth that humanity was set on, the human ecological footprint would soon overshoot planetary boundaries, effectively pushing us out of our very own home. The limits to growth was really just the beginning of Aurelio Peccei's efforts to make a dent in our certainties about the infinite abundance of the planet's resources, and certainties about a societal system where growth comes at no cost. Thanks to the limits to growth, Aurelio Peccei started a worldwide debate that someone defined as a Big Bang, even, on attentioning us to the danger of not thinking of the future as an interconnected system of cause and effect, happening in a very defined framework of finite resources. I have started my mandate as president this past November, and one of my main focuses is going to be actively working to bring the teachings of Aurelio Peccei to a younger generation. A generation that is keenly listening in, is definitely tuned in, and is ready to take action by facing the hard choices and trying to shape the global decision-making by working together and updating, hopefully, an antiquated and outdated belief system. We've seen in the video Aurelio talking to young people, and that's really what the focus should be. So I guess at this point I leave, well, thank you all for being here to celebrate Aurelio Peccei. And I really hope that we can work together to build a future that everybody wants and no one will ever be excluded from. Have a lovely night, and maybe you can take it home. Gianfranco.
Thank you so much to Sandrine and others. As you know well, I am not in program. I am always very difficulties for me to speak about Aurelio. Aurelio was for me sorry, because it's an incredible effect. I don't, I have no words to explain why. I have the great privilege to have an incredible friendship with him from 1976 to the end of his life at 1984, when he died after an operation in a clinic. And he was for me a great teacher. He changed my life. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gianfranco, and I think that, well, we could actually almost close here, because he changed your life and he changed so many people's lives. But before we do close, and thank you for that heartfelt, very short but very important speech to both of you, I do want to pass on the closing words to Minister Giovannini, but for me, my friend Enrico. But before I do that, I want to thank those that made this evening and also actually the panel this afternoon possible. That was some very important partners for us. BMW Foundation, obviously the Aurelio Peccei Foundation, ASVIS, but also very much the support and some financial support from the Regenerative Society Foundation and from Andrea and Giovanna, who believed in what we needed to do today, and also the Enel Foundation. And I think it's incredibly important also for me just to express a word of thank you to Till Kelleroff, who has really been my support in the staff of the Club of Rome since I started as the president, and who has been also incredibly instrumental with Mimansha, who actually is Nepalese and currently in Thailand, and also with Mariam, who've really supported us in making sure that tonight's event was able to go on and be as wonderful as it has been. My friend Enrico, the floor is yours, and then we will go and drink together.
Good evening to everybody. It's an incredible moment for us, and I hope for many other people who are not here today, because I never met Aurelio Peccei, but as Gianfranco said, he indeed changed my life. And I would like just to make the point that this evening must be a moment in which we commit ourselves to be as great as those who can change the world. So I will just focus on change, also to explain why the people who took the floor this evening were so important also in changing things. Sandrine with Manfella were the two co-presidents of the Club of Rome that for the first time decided to have two women as co-presidents. And I remember the discussion in the executive committee, how this was considered disruptive. Never seen before. So, okay, the balance, but two women? Yes, we made that decision, and I think was a great decision. With Gianfranco, years ago, we started the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, a great group of associations, more than 300 currently. I left, of course, when I joined the government 1 year, a little bit ago. And that was another mission impossible, bringing together the different pieces of the Italian society, working on implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. With Gianfranco, we worked so hard to make it possible. Roberto, when he was Minister of Finance, took a great decision, accepting one of the proposals of the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development to change the name of the Interministerial Committee on Economic Planning into Interministerial Committee on Economic Planning and Sustainable Development. It was a big change. This government is continuing in that line. And our Prime Minister decided in December that every new project that has to go through that interministerial committee have to be proved and tested against the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. With Lorenzo, we had an incredible experience in Pretoria after a meeting in Bhutan. You heard about that by Hunter yesterday. He invited us to Pretoria and just to continue thinking about that. And during that meeting, we said, okay, let's think about a brand new country. What could or should do? And we listed, as university professors do normally, this list of things, and I already mentioned. Then we published this article on The Guardian, say goodbye to capitalism and say hello to the Republic of Well-being. And the first idea was to change the Constitution, and this is what we did this year. And of course, he voted in favor of that proposal, as you can imagine, but that was a fight for 6 years of the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. Giovanna is not here now. She had another commitment. But again, with her, we started ASVIS, her engagement in the impact finance movement around the world, but also to make this incredible museum also the host for our Festival of Sustainable Development for several years. And then I met Enrico Giovannini in 1957, but then I met the new Enrico Giovannini in 1976 when I read the book about the limits to growth. And believe it or not, I was born 1 year, that was 1976, 1 year before you were born. At the time, the name of Aurelio Peccei was in the books. But then there was the neoliberal revolution, and therefore when you studied, those ideas were put aside, but they're coming back. And so reading that book, I decided to become an economist. And just to tell you how strongly I was influenced by his thinking, the titles of the last 3 books that I wrote are Choosing the Future, Sustainable Utopia, and That Different World. So I think that I'm trying to do my best just to be a dreamer, like many of you. I stop here just announcing what it was briefly mentioned by Giovanna Melandri. You saw the project for the big MAXXI. You saw that there will be a garden, there will be this corridor, green corridor. And when we were talking about this event with Sandrine, I said, why don't we give the name of Aurelio to that? And Giovanna accepted. So what I'm announcing is that I'm pleased to say that this green corridor, the garden in this MAXXI museum, will have Aurelio Peccei's name. In this way, his memory will be intrinsically linked to this place, and therefore, as Giovanna said, this is not only a museum, it's a place where researchers will be working, where students will come and so on. So we will avoid that what happened to Lorenzo, that nobody told him about Aurelio Peccei. This will never happen again, at least in this city, and as this is an international museum at the world level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that concludes this portion of the evening. But now we have drinks outside in the cafe. Till, maybe you can start to lead us towards, and Mariam, because I have no idea where the cafe is. And those from the, just out front? Okay. And thank you so much. And let's carry this beautiful evening with us as we continue our lives outside these walls. Thank you.